My name is Charlene Margot, and I am co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture. We are just delighted and honored to have with us tonight author Kelly Yang. You'll be hearing more about her new best-selling books, Finally Seen and Front Desk. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here. I am delighted to be talking to you guys about my books and my whole writing journey and really how I got to this point in my life. I did not think I was going to become an author when I was a little girl. We moved here to this country when I was 6 years old, and I did not speak a single word of English. I had a really hard time that first year in school. I remember I didn't even know where the bathroom was because I did not know the word girl. And so I remember being really scared every day that I would need to go to the bathroom and I wouldn't be able to ask somebody. That first year was really hard. My teacher worked really hard with me. She assigned me a ESL teacher who taught me English sort of word by word. And I remember at the end of that first year, I still had not said one thing. I had worked really hard with my ESL teacher in private in our sessions, but I had not mustered up the courage to raise my hand and say something to my class. And I was running out of time because it was already the last week of class. And so I remember sitting there just looking at the clock, looking at my classmates and going, oh my gosh, I cannot go through the entire first grade and not say one thing. I've got to just do it. And so I think on the second to last day of class, I raised my hand and I said something. And I think I might have said, I need to go to the bathroom. But anyway, based on this one sentence, my entire class was like, oh my God, she can talk. And my classmates were so thrilled for me. My teacher was so excited for me. And based on this one sentence, they gave me a report card. Okay, now I have my very first report card to show you guys so we can take a look at it. This was me. These are my parents, and we're just sort of, I think the first place we went to was Louisiana. I had an amazing ESL teacher, and I had amazing librarians. I've always had amazing librarians who fed me book after book. But this was my report card. So it did not have any grades. And I was like, phew, I was so worried about these grades. But instead it had a note, and the note said, Yang entered Taurus February 19th, 1991. She could speak no English. We have been working with her on her English and on a pre-primer level in reading. She does very well on most of her math. It has only been within the last week that she's been speaking very limited sentences in English. She is being placed in grade 2 because students are not retained because of limited English. I was so thrilled and so proud to have this note. I think I actually folded it up and put it in my pocket for years. I would carry it around with me because it just made me feel like, you know, somebody in this country believes in me. They're willing to give me a chance. I have to work hard. They're giving me an opportunity, and I want to take advantage of it. But it was still tricky because my parents were first-generation immigrants, which meant that they moved around a lot. We were constantly moving, getting fired from one job, getting hired on another job. And one of the jobs that they got, which I never really even believed until I got there, was managing a motel. Okay, now, I had no idea how they got this job because we had absolutely no hotel management experience. My mom was an engineer in China. My dad was a doctor. So between the two of them, absolutely no hospitality industry experience. But there we were. And it was a little motel in Anaheim, California, really close to Disneyland. It had about 30 rooms. And as soon as we got there, we realized there's nobody else working in this motel, not one person. There was no pool guy. There was no cleaning crew. There was nobody, not even a gardener. There was just us. And you can imagine with 30 rooms, that pretty much meant their entire day, my parents' entire day would be basically cleaning. And they quickly realized that, well, we all quickly realized that there was nobody to take care of the front desk. If they were going to be cleaning all day, there was nobody to take care of the front desk. And so I decided at the young age of 8 that I was going to step into this role. I was like, yeah, sure, I can handle it. I'm going to really try my best, and it'll give me a chance to practice English. And I tried very, very hard in this job. And at first, a lot of people were really unhappy to deal with me, because you can imagine being an adult when you're on vacation. You walk in, you want to be treated with, you wanted to be handled by a professional. You do not want to deal with an 8-year-old. But I really, really tried. I applied myself. I really cared about each customer, went out of my way to solve their problems. And after a while, I really started to get the hang of it. And I would also go to the library a lot. So I'm going to show you guys some pictures from this time in my life. It was a really interesting time. This was the motel. Okay. And here are some really cool pictures from this time. This was me and my mom playing tennis when she wasn't cleaning, which was rare. Most of the time she was cleaning. This was us at Halloween. There was no money, and there were no costumes, but we had a lot of toilet paper, so we would go as mummies. And I love this picture because, first of all, I love this pair of pants now, looking back. At the time, I was really mortified wearing these pants to school because my mom never wanted to get me jeans. She refused to buy me a pair of jeans from Macy's because they were too expensive. Instead, she made me wear these pajama kind of pink zigzag pants from the Goodwill. Anyways, the other reason why I like this picture is because this bike here, which we got at a garage sale, allowed me to ride back and forth from the front desk right here, which was where I worked, to the Anaheim Public Library, which is my other second home where I grew up. And I would devour books. I would read books like Babysitter's Club and Judy Blume and Goosebumps, and I would just read. I would devour these books. And I loved them so much. They were my dearest friends, because often I had trouble making friends at school since I was always sort of the new girl. But these books were my best friends. But the thing I realized as I started reading more and more of these books was none of these kids lived like my life. They didn't live like me. They did not live in a motel. They did not have parents who were constantly worried about money or getting fired all the time or having to move all the time and having to switch schools. They also didn't look like me. I mean, there was Claudia from the Babysitter's Club right here, and that was a big, big deal, right? Claudia from the Babysitter's Club was a huge deal. But if you turn to the back of the Babysitter's Club, the author, Anna Martin, is white. And so it made me realize, like, there are not a lot of books about people who look like me. And even the ones that do exist, they're not written by people who look like me. We're not really allowed to tell our own stories, almost. And that made me really worried about telling people at school about my life. I did not want to tell anyone at school that my parents and I worked in a motel. I became obsessed with keeping this a secret because I was worried that they were going to judge me, and I was kind of ashamed of it, because I never saw it in a book before. And so what that meant was, growing up, I had a kind of lonely childhood. I didn't talk very much about my real life to my friends. I never had anybody come over for a play date. I didn't have a single birthday party. And so, and it was really too bad. It was kind of a shame, because in reality, my life at the motel was amazing. I got to check people in. I got to meet people every day. It was fun. It was really fun. I got to take their credit cards, which is a big deal when you're a kid. I got to give them all kinds of restaurant suggestions, even though I never went to any of the restaurants, and also Disneyland suggestions, which rides to go on first, even though I actually never went to Disneyland. So it was a riot. It was incredibly fun. And it was too bad that I couldn't tell anyone at school any of this. And this is important because this is what happens when we don't see ourselves represented in books, when our children don't see themselves in these stories. And that brings me to my latest book, Finally Seen. This is my latest book. It actually, it was released in, I think, February this year. And it follows Lena Gao, who is a 10-year-old kid who's just arrived in the US from China. And she doesn't think anyone can understand what she's going through because she has a really unique background, which is that she has had to live in China for the last 5 years with her grandparents, with her grandma. She has not gotten to be with her parents. Her parents came to the US first without her. They took her little sister, but they did not take Lena. And why did they not take Lena? Well, they thought they were only going to get things settled and get everything sorted and get a stable job, then send for her. But, 1 month turned into 1 year, turned into 5 whole years that she's just been sitting by the phone waiting for them. And it's been a hard 5 years. And so when she gets here, she kind of thinks, well, that's something no one's ever going to understand. No one's ever going to understand what I went through, not even my own family. So what's the point of talking about it? And she doesn't know any English either. So she's having a lot of problems just communicating at school, getting her point across. She's worried she'll never really be seen in this country. She'll always be sort of in the back and invisible until she picks up a book. And it is a book that is just life-changing for her. It is, we all remember this book. I'm sure a lot of you guys can think back to the first book that you've read where you really felt truly seen. And for Lena, it's this book called Flea Shop. It is about a Chinese American girl who also comes to this country. It's a graphic novel, so she's able to understand it better because her English is not great. She can understand it better because she can see the pictures. It gives her a lot of confidence that she can understand this book. And she's so excited that this book is going to be read in her school, in her classroom with all her new classmates. Maybe now they'll finally understand something about her. But as they're reading this book, somebody has a problem with this book. Somebody in the class, their parents are going, well, I don't know about this book. It's talking about the immigrant experience. Should these kids really be reading about that? It's talking a little bit about race. I don't know. And so suddenly this book is possibly going to be facing a book challenge. Now, this book challenge thread, if you guys will bear with me, I'm going to share my screen with you. It comes from personal experience, which I never thought would happen. But basically, one of my books, the Front Desk series, most notably Front Desk, faced a book challenge right around, I don't know, I think it had been out for 4 or 5 years already. And all of a sudden, kids were loving this book. Every school district in America was reading this book. This book was talking about the immigrant experience. It was relatable. It was funny. It was really all about my life. And all of a sudden, this one district said, oh, well, a few parents objected to the subject matter. So now the kids are suddenly not going to be able to read it. And so this is from a very personal place when I talk about book banning, because when it happens to you, you're just kind of in shock. You can't even believe that this is happening. But in fact, this is happening in so many districts all over the country. Thousands and thousands of districts have been battling these bans. Interestingly enough, a recent study showed that even though there have been thousands of book bans, 60% of the book bans have been started by 11 people. So, which is a ludicrous fact, but it also is very encouraging that it's not everybody who wants these books banned. It's really literally 11 people. Anyway, so Lena is facing the possibility that her beloved book might be challenged. And she's dealing with this very much the way Florida deals with it, and Oklahoma and all these different states have been dealing with all these amazing books possibly getting banned, in some cases completely removed from bookshelves. And she has a choice to make, which is, is she going to hang out in the back and just stay invisible? Or is she going to do something and be finally seen? And it is a terrifying choice, right? It's a terrifying choice. It's a choice that I made when I was a kid, and I stayed invisible, which is why I didn't talk about my real life, about my amazing experience working in a motel for all of my childhood. I didn't really talk about it until I became a mom And I looked at my three kids, Elliot, Tilden, and Nina, and realized, oh my gosh, I was so good at keeping this a secret that I didn't even tell my own kids. And finally that summer, I think it was 2015, I sat down to write Front Desk. Now, I never really thought about the reception for Front Desk. I had no idea that it would be so wildly popular, and so warmly embraced. And it's been just amazing for me to go around the country and really hear every day from kids, and also from adults, surprisingly, from a lot of adults who finally see themselves in this story. And because of Front Desk, they feel like they have permission to talk about their life and their story. So we'll go back to this tweet that I received out of nowhere. And this is where I had to make another choice, right? And it was one of those things where, again, so hard, so difficult. What do you do, right? You have this very popular book, and all of a sudden people are not allowed to read it. Do you say something as an author? Do you say something? And this was really a hard choice. This was back in 2021, I think 2021 that this happened. And I realized, you know what? I have to be brave. I cannot be scared that if I say something that other people are going to ban it. I have to tell people what's going on, because if they're doing this to me, the chances are they're doing it to so many other people, who, may not have a book that everyone, may not be able to weather the storm. And so I got on social media, and I got on social media, and I wonder if I can play this and show you guys. I don't know if you guys can. My parents, gave up a lot to come to this country. And it even says in Front Desk, and I'm getting really emotional because, literally says in Front Desk, despite all our suffering, that this country is a good country because it is freer than where we came from. And so I really believe in that. And one of the most important tenets of freedom is the freedom to read, the freedom to be able to enjoy these windows and mirrors. So it's so critically important. It's something we have to actively protect, actively safeguard, and it takes all of us. Okay, so I made that video, and I made the terrifying choice as an adult to put it up on TikTok, which at my age is truly terrifying. And would you believe it? By the end of that weekend, the book was unbanned from the school district. So many people were outraged, and they wrote emails, and they called the school, and they were so enthusiastic about unbanning it, so insistent, that the school district realized that they were wrong. They shouldn't be yanking this book. They should let kids read. And so I just want to, I always want to remind people that even though we're looking at some of these numbers and some of these charts, and it looks scary, we all have a voice. Every single one of us has a voice. And the voices of those who don't want to be banned, don't want books banned, are just as important and just as powerful as the few voices, really the few, like the 11, that are shouting that we need books banned. And before we jump into Q&A, I'm really excited to share that there's a sequel to Finally Seen called Finally Heard. This book is so important for us parents to get our kids to read, because it talks about social media. And it really shows kids just how dangerous social media is, but in a way that kids are really going to absorb and understand and get it. I've been having this problem with my own kids. I have, 3 kids. One of them has a phone. He's in high school, but I also have a middle schooler and an elementary schooler. And every day it's just like, mommy, why can't I have a phone? Why can't I have social media? And I decided to write a novel about it, something that they could not put down, because it was really, really funny and dramatic and great. It's a great book, but that it would really teach them, all the ways we're being impacted by these little devices that we don't even realize. Like, I learned so much about this from this book. And now my daughter, every day she's like more aware of it and understands it. So anyway, I really encourage parents to check out Finally Heard. If you can, read it with your kid. because it is one of those life-changing books. I think it, at the very least, once you read it, you're not going to be the same. They're not going to be the same. They'll always understand more about these devices and have a shot at having a healthy relationship with phones, I think. And with that, I'm excited to answer all your questions.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly. That was so much fun. My partner, Bev Hartman, and I were lucky enough to see you in Los Altos in person. And I know that back then the book bans were pretty recent, and I know they really hurt you. Can you tell us more about that? I mean, my favorite TikTok is your daughter standing up for her mom. Can you tell us some more about that? Obviously, you're raising more advocates in your house, Kelly.
Yeah, it is disheartening. It's one of those things where you kind of get more numb to it as time goes on, because it's so common to have book bans now. But that makes me it almost breaks my heart that we're a little more numb to it, as the receiver of this bad news. I do think, though, that what's been so encouraging is I think the public opinion is very much on the side of no book bans. I mean, I think that people are realizing this is ridiculous. Of all the things we need to worry about in this world today, books are on the very bottom of the list. I mean, there are so many things that we could be thinking about, worrying about. Books, if our kids are reading, they are getting smarter, they're having more empathy, they are understanding the world better, they're that much more prepared for the future and for dealing with people in the future. So I'm really encouraged by that. So as much as it is hard, I think it's a very bright future for books.
I think so too. I mean, I cannot imagine a world, Kelly, where people would ban Anne Frank's book.
I know. And oh my God, yes. Just that's the thing. It's like, it's a slippery slope. If you let them ban one book, then it almost makes intolerance okay. And then, well, what about this one? What about this one? What about this one? And literally nothing is safe. Nothing is safe. There's a book about, dim sum that people want to ban. And it's kind of like, who is offended by dim sum? Really? It's just a delicious food.
Oh my goodness, I know. I have a 20-month-old granddaughter, and I was so proud that one of the first things she did at 2 weeks was go to a protest with her parents with her little pink pussycat hat. They were on the book ban trail. I made sure to buy her that Babies Everywhere book, the board book that was banned. Start them early on banned books, Kelly, I say.
Yeah. And, parents, it's our job to have a conversation with the kids, right? There's nothing that should be so scary that we can't have a conversation with our kids. And if we can have a conversation, if our kids can see us as a trusted, as a available source of information that they can always go to talk, even about things that are uncomfortable, that they don't understand, that makes us uncomfortable, that we don't understand. If we can navigate that together as parent and child, having those discussions because we're reading, then we win, because then our kids don't just go talk to a stranger on social media in a conversation that we have no idea what's being said, what kind of information and misinformation is getting distributed there. Because, we know that we can't, when we ban books, we can't just, we don't actually shut down conversations. All we do is just move them somewhere else where we can't really we don't even know.
Right. This program that I started 18 years ago, the Parent Education Series, had that one goal, Kelly, that we were providing strategy, information, and education to parents so that they could talk to their kids. And nothing has changed my mind about the importance of that in all these years. And that's why bringing somebody like you who's saying, look, everyone, representation really matters. When that little boy in a wheelchair at Target sees a picture of a child in a wheelchair, right? When there's a child in one of your books and they can see themselves. I mean, you obviously were a very bright little girl, but you spent a year in school without saying anything. I'm assuming you probably caught up pretty fast, but it really, really matters. And we now have so many immigrant children here in California and across the country, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? Everybody deserves to be seen. And when we ban books, we're sort of making a judgment call saying, oh, nope, sorry, that your narrative does not deserve to be seen and talked about. And we can't do that because this is part of our country is we have to be a country that welcomes and appreciates everyone. This is literally the best part about the United States is that we bring all the brightest minds to the table, and that's what makes our country succeed.
So Kelly, you mentioned that, parts of your story, obviously like in Front Desk and everybody, this book, I just could not put this book down. It was so unusual to think about your so educated parents cleaning the bedrooms and bathrooms. But you do say then it took you a long time to tell your own life story to your own children. Why was that?
I think it's because in my mind, I really worried about them feeling sorry for me. And I didn't want them to feel sorry for me because I had an amazing childhood. I am so proud of my childhood. I got to open and change a vending machine whenever I wanted, and they don't get to do that. I wouldn't trade my childhood for any amount of money for anyone else's childhood. But because I didn't want them to feel sorry for me, it took me a really long time to even say the words, hey, I worked in a motel. Because I knew that they would immediately go, why and where were you? And oh my God, that sounds so terrible. And I knew that in order to do the story justice, I needed to show them the complexity of that experience, the joy, the highlights, the triumphs, along with, yes, the pain. It was hard. It was a hard time. So the only way I could do it was to actually sit down and write a book. And it's funny, my husband was sending me this ridiculous TikTok about how I can't just get to the point. It was so funny. He was sending me this TikTok and it was like, the way to communicate with men is to just get to the point. And it was like a subtle kind of like, maybe you just take a really long time with your stories. And I sent him back and I was like, maybe men should rethink how they listen to stories, Anyway, it was really funny. But yeah, it took me a really long time to figure out how to tell all of the story.
Well, we're glad that it brought you to write these books, Kelly, even if the kids didn't get to see all the pictures of you initially. I'm sure by now they have, right?
Yes.
So you said in your introduction here that you didn't grow up planning to be a writer, but obviously you were a reader, you were a book lover. When did you just decide that you had to be a writer?
Well, I always admired books. I just didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if it was possible. Again, I never saw any book where on the back it was someone who looked like me. I mean, growing up in the 90s, there weren't these books. This is why I'm trying so hard as fast as I can to fill up the bookshelves, but there just weren't these books. And so even that very question, can you be a writer? It's like, well, I don't know, can I? And I also, the other thing was that I did make a lot of grammatical mistakes when I was growing up. My grammar was not great. My spelling was not great. I mean, to this day, I still have to double check and triple check because I just was a new English learner. I was new. But I remember my third grade teacher, she said, you can learn grammar and you can learn spelling. And she didn't even know back then, we didn't even have spell check, but yeah, we can literally spell check now. But she said, one thing that's hard to learn, which you have a lot of, is emotion. And she was right.
I mean, it still blows my mind that somehow between age 8 and 13, you got yourself to UC Berkeley. That is a story in itself, isn't it?
It is. And maybe one day I'll write that story, but it was kind of also just a little sad as well, because I think in making one decision, I completely put myself on a different track forever.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize all the repercussions, but I kind of missed out on a lot of normal high school experiences, normal growing up. I kind of missed out on a childhood in a way, which is probably why I write children's books now.
So that brings me to my next question. When did you feel, or how did you come to understand that you really wanted to write for young adults, for older children? When did that become important to you?
Well, for me, it really started off with I wanted to tell my son. It was a very specific goal. I wanted to tell my son about my life, and I didn't have the words. I couldn't come up with a conversation like a normal person. And I needed to put all of the emotions in there. And so it was really kind of almost a letter to him. It was like, this is my life. And every chapter was ending on a cliffhanger because I knew that he hated reading and didn't want to read. And in order to hook him, I needed to keep it a great, brisk pace for a boy like him. And so that's sort of kind of how I did it. It was a very organic, and I wasn't thinking about getting it published. I really wasn't. But at the end of the summer, I had more or less a rough draft. And he said, "Mom, you need to do something with this." And I remember specifically, he said, "If you don't do something with this, can I have it so I can make copies and sell them to my friends?"
You have very entrepreneurial children who defend their mom.
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, I better keep this manuscript safe from my family.
That's a great story, Kelly. So I will ask you, in Finally Seen, Lena encounters prejudice in more ways than one. With her family, with the landlord, they're always worried about running out of money and not being able to pay the back rent. She sees it in the man who owns the farm where her dad works. Why did you really feel it was important to show different kinds of bias and prejudice in this book?
I wanted to show, two things. Obviously, we're talking about book banning, but we're also just talking about the consequence of not being seen and not seeing the full picture. So not for us to not see, and her parents really don't see the full picture of old man Pete and of their situation until the end. But also Lena doesn't feel seen in her life. And so I really wanted to explore this, double-edged sword of what happens when we don't see, we just refuse to see, because people who want to ban books, they just don't want to see. They're like deniers of the world changing. They don't want to admit that the world now has people who look like me, right? And other people. But there's a consequence to that. There's an emotional cost to that. And we, I feel kind of bad for them because the world is changing. And, I don't know if they're ready to pay the price of that denial, because it's a hard one too.
It really is. Kelly, we work with a community liaison person here, Michelle Ramon, and she has really taught us about immigration grief. And I feel that we felt a lot of that in Lena, right? She's missing her grandmother in China. Yes, she had finally come to be with her family, but they were not what she expected. The place they lived was not what she expected. So is that a typical experience, or was that unique to your family?
I think it's very common to kids, especially when you have been told, it's been built up in your mind, America's going to be this magical place, everyone's going to be rich and maybe live in a mansion. The things we see from TV versus the reality, and it's a big shock for a lot of people, even for us adults. It's a shock sometimes. Sometimes people, the way that we imagine life as an adult, like life as an adult, even now I'm like, man, adulting is hard. I don't want to pay my property taxes. It's just hard.
That's really true.
Yeah.
So we have some questions. I'm going to add a few of these into our discussion too. Writer asks, how much are your books based off of your life? Is any of Front Desk fiction?
Yeah. Front Desk is definitely, like, I would say 60% real and 40% fiction. It's probably the most autobiographical of all of my books. I've gotten a lot better at actually creating fiction. I think I part of my background is that I used to write a lot for newspapers, and so I come from like more of a essayist or memoirist kind of background. But everything always stems from a very real emotion. So that's where I come at it first. It's not really what happens, but just what am I feeling? What is the feeling that I want to explore? Whether it's a feeling of, not being seen and finally being that excitement, that joy, and then having that joy yanked. Like that's the feeling of finally seen, and a feeling like, well, maybe I can still get it back somehow. How do I get it back? There's that, there's that mixed emotion there. Or just, like in Finally Heard, both the parent and the kid just navigating this new world. What does it mean to be a kid in today's world, living with this dual reality? We have the real world and we have the online world. And sometimes the two don't match up, Sometimes what your friends are saying about you in real life is not matching up with what they're saying about you online. And that's a really hard feeling too.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. Some people are asking questions like, was Lupe really your friend?
Yes, my friend in 7th grade is the real person that Lupe is based off of. And I had the best time in 7th grade. She was my best friend. She was Mexican American, just this extremely happy person. I mean, her joy was infectious. Everybody wanted to be her friend. But I think she kind of looked at me and she saw like how lonely I was. I was new to the school. We had moved. It was like another motel. And she just decided, you know what, I'm going to be your friend for this year. And it was so magnanimous of her. We were both in marching band, which I joined just so I can avoid PE. But it worked out because she was also in marching band. And I didn't realize, but when you join marching band, you actually get to go on a lot of different competitions. So it was super fun that year. But even her, I never told her about the motel either.
You didn't.
And I never told her. And I remember once she was like, how come we never hang out at your house? She's like, where do you live? And I remember saying, oh my God. Oh, I live on the corner of such and such street and such street. I just made it up. And she went there that weekend looking for me. And then she came back to school and was like, that's a gas station. And I actually told her, I was like, oh, well, did you look on the other side of the street? And she was like, no. I was like, oh, well, that's where I live. And it was my biggest regret, I think, not telling the real Lupe where I lived and what we did. I think she would have been totally fine with it. She would have had so much fun with me. And I hope one day she's out there, she goes into a bookstore and picks up front desk and she looks in the back, because we always put a picture of what I looked like when I was a kid in the back.
Oh.
The reason we do that is because maybe one day the real Lupe will see it and be like, I know that girl, and we'll get back in touch.
I think that's a great story. My best friend, who I've now known for almost 60 years, we met at a reading group at the Palo Alto Public Library. And we were reading A Wrinkle in Time, and we were 8. So I know that feeling, Kelly. Those friendships that are built on books and reading, they are lifelong things, aren't they?
Yeah. Any kind of friendship that just goes years and years, stands the test of time, just hang on to them.
Exactly. So here's one of our parents asking, do you have a favorite book of those that you've written?
My favorite book. Well, you know what? I'm really proud. I am really proud of Finally Heard. It's a book that I try to write so many times. I messed up and I went back and I would try to write. It's really hard to write about social media. It's like such a big topic to tackle, but it felt so critically important, for me to explain to kids how this algorithm is really shaping all of us and really kind of changing all of us. So it took me 8 drafts to write this book, and I almost gave up. I think I was in tears several times. I almost was like, it's not going to happen. This is too hard. Even my publisher was like, this is a little too ambitious. Because it needed to be executed just right in order for it to not feel preachy, for kids to really get on board. And in the end, I'm just so delighted. My daughter just finished reading it. And the facts that she's saying in the car, and even what she's talking about with her friends, and she's telling them and trying to educate them, it makes me so proud. Just like I'm so glad I stuck with it.
We are too. You know, Bev and I have a running joke, which is it doesn't matter what topic we have. We could be talking about sexuality or compassion or hope. We always end up talking about social media and video games.
Yeah.
That's what parents want to talk about.
Yeah, and it's hard. And I'm just really happy that this is going to be another tool for us parents because it's been a really lonely battle. You know, like I have been fighting this on my own for many months now.
Absolutely. And I love the idea of you reading together. We actually, Bev and I have a children's literature book club where we really, both of us are former early educators and we love sharing children's literature. I think this would be something really fun, parents, to do with your kids. Get that book and read it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, here's a comment I love. Hi, Kelly. She says, I'm here as my daughter absolutely loves your books, and I'm grateful to our fourth grade teacher for introducing us to your books. Thank you for your incredible and inspirational work. Would love to read more books on parenting teenagers from you. Do you have any recommendations or anything in the works?
I have two young adult novels. Most people know me from my middle grade, but Parachutes is a young adult novel, and so is Private Label. And they're both about navigating, you know, being a young woman, right? Being a young woman is hard in our day and age, especially with issues like consent and sometimes, you know, things that come up like people making judgments about you and how do you step out of that. So they're both complex, female-centered books, and I encourage you to read them.
You have some real book fans here in this group tonight, Kelly. Here's a question for you. Was Jason a character based on your real life? Was he really rude and did he really kiss you?
Oh my goodness. No, Jason did not kiss me. So Jason, the story behind Jason is that Jason was a composite character, is a composite character. He is based off of two real people in real life. So we managed 3 motels in total. 2 of them had an owner with a son, and one son went to my school but never talked to me. In fact, the first day he was like, I am not talking to you. You're the only Chinese girl in the school. I'm the only Chinese boy in the school. If I talk to you, everyone's going to think that there's something going on between us, that I like you and I don't like you. And I was like, oh yeah, well, I don't like you either. That was kid number 1. Kid number 2 did not go to my school, but he would come around a lot with his dad. So he would always come around, and I think he and I would argue all the time. So his dad would be, you know, probably complain about something with my parents, and then he would take his dad's side, I would take my parents' side. So we would constantly bicker. And so I thought it'd be really fun to put the 2 Jasons together and have them be in my class and have them have a crush on me.
That's a great story. I'd love that. Again, more fans of your books here. Do you plan on writing any more books in the Front Desk series?
I would love to. We were still waiting to see what the numbers are for the 5th book that just came out, Top Story. It is set in San Francisco. It's set in Chinatown. It's so swoony and beautiful. It's a really great read. But the way it works is basically, you know, we have to see if there was enough interest in the last book, and then I have to look at my schedule and we have to slot it in. And so it's a whole thing. But yeah, I would love to keep writing it.
As your children are getting older, do you feel like you would like to push yourself more in that direction for books for older kids, or how does that feel to you?
I mean, my daughter is still 10, so I still feel pretty solidly in middle grade. But I am working on something that is not middle grade, and I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to jinx it, because it might be terrible. But
Okay.
I am working on something.
I love all these people who you got a lot of fans here. Kelly says, thanks, Kelly. I'm ordering 4 books tonight. We have copies of all the other books. Thank you. And here's somebody who wants to know if Jason was actually Taiwanese.
Yes, both of those kids were Taiwanese.
Okay, fair enough. What else did I want to ask you? So, Kelly, you've talked enough. I think you've talked about why that title of Finally Seen really matters for you. And I just think that it's important for people to know that sometimes people don't think that YA or young adult books are as rich emotionally, but I don't find that at all in your books. As you say, you are an emotional person, and all of that comes out in your books. I
Thank
think
you.
that's why kids love them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, reading these books, I mean, there's so much going on in the process of writing them. Like, you got to keep it entertaining and funny, and, you got to keep it at a brisk pace. So it's hard work, man. So all those people who frown on middle grade, like, I invite them to try writing middle grade because it's not easy.
Exactly. So, Kelly, if you would comment again on why you believe that representation is so important, both in your life. I mean, people are asking questions like, in your second book, Three Keys, we're wondering if Lupe's parents were actually separated, dad in jail, mom couldn't get back from Mexico. We were very worried.
No, in real life, well, my friend in seventh grade did not have that. I don't think that anybody was deported. However, I remember really distinctly all of us being super worried about Prop 187. It didn't even matter what your immigration status was. It just was so scary to think that, half our friends wouldn't be able to go to school and people wouldn't be able to go to the hospital. And especially in a place like California, it just was a very terrifying thought as a kid. And then I just remember people would always talk about it at school. Some people would be like, well, I think that person's going to be gone. She's a goner. And it was just like, what in the world? This is so wrong. So I was really very, very, and it was just seared in me. It was like, it wasn't something I could ever not write about because it was such a formative experience for me growing up, that I had to write about it. It was super important that we remember, even for us as a state, to remember this is part of our history.
Exactly. So I want to ask you just a little bit, if you would comment on your project. My son calls himself an attorney in recovery. He did the Silicon Valley law thing and then left it and moved to Montana, but now he's a dad. Life is good. But what got you out of that to found that project and want to give kids back in Asia a voice?
Well, I met my husband when I was in Hong Kong. I was there for my second year law school. I had a summer associate position at a law firm in Asia. It was an American law firm, but they had offices everywhere. So I was working in the Beijing office and then the Hong Kong office, and I met him there. And I don't know, I never really liked doing corporate law, in the summers that I was doing it. And I had tried various things, and it just was always, it seemed like a lot of repetitive work that wasn't creative. And I think I have a creative mind, and like my mind actually becomes, it really becomes slush when it's not stimulated in a creative way. I become extremely not efficient. And so anyways, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna, after law school, he encouraged me. He said, why don't you try doing something else? You don't have to be a lawyer. You could do something else. We were engaged at that point, and I decided, yeah, I'm gonna try something else because I really love writing. I still didn't know at this point if I could do it as a profession, but I love I love the escape of writing. Like, it was always something I could do, and no matter how you felt in real life, you're just instantly transported somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And that I thought was so cool. And I also thought that it'd be really cool to give that superpower of having a voice to kids in Asia who were usually, always obsessed with taking tests, and they had a lot of anxiety and stress over school, and they just didn't have a creative outlet, and they really didn't have much of a voice. So I thought, okay, I'm going to work with kids on these two aspects, both the creative writing side and the, public speaking, debating side, and see what happens. And it actually became so much fun. I mean, to this day, I miss the classroom. I do. I was talking to some of the teachers there because the program is still running. It's run by a wonderful team there. And, I was saying, it's the kind of thing, teaching is the kind of thing you really don't realize how it impacts you until you're out of it. and it's like it's a lifelong gift. It really is.
It really is, Kelly. I have known I wanted to be a teacher really my whole life. And it now gives me great pleasure to be a teacher for parents. But I do think it's something that gets you when you're very, very young, right?
Totally, totally. And I don't think I could have written a lot of these classroom scenes without that experience.
Right. And I also think that you don't, but many people underestimate what an 8 or 10-year-old is thinking and feeling. You know, Bev and I both, having worked for years with very young children, I one time had a little boy from Holland who was like you, prideful. He didn't want to speak until he kind of got it down. The first thing he said to me was in the spring, and he came up with a piece of art and he handed it to me and said, "May I take this home with me today, Charlene?"
Oh my goodness.
That was the first sentence he said.
Wow.
Yeah, I love that story.
I wonder what he's up to now. That is so cool.
I know that he came to the United States with nothing but a trunk of Legos.
Oh,
Yeah. So I do love that your characters are complex and emotional, and they're really like, you know, little Lena was trying so hard to help support the family, right? You made that a part of your books. That's a real life kind of, that's a deep worry for a little kid, isn't it? To try to financially support the family.
yeah, 100%. And a lot of kids don't have that. I mean, my kids are pretty privileged. They don't have to have that worry, but it is something that you don't get a choice on for a lot of other kids.
Absolutely. Well, you've got some people here who are really, really fans of your books. Here we go. Is there anyone like Deshaun in your real life?
I think I did have a crush on another kid who was this like a really great writer. What was his name? I think it was like Jeffrey or something. And in oh gosh, that must have been like fourth or fifth grade. I think probably fourth grade. Yeah, fourth grade. And then I definitely had a crush on someone in fifth grade, but he's not in the front desk books, not yet, anyway.
Not yet, anyway. Okay. Here's a great comment. Hi, Kelly. I'm also an immigrant from Hong Kong. I moved to the Bay Area in my early 20s. I went through a similar experience like you too. I didn't speak much English. In Hong Kong, I just developed thick skin when I had an opportunity to speak while working in restaurants. You are very inspiring, and I'll introduce your books to my kids.
Thank you.
I think that's really lovely. Others are saying we really appreciate it. Here's a good question, Kelly. Are there ways that fifth graders and their parents can help bring more of a voice to opposing banned books?
Absolutely. First of all, I think it's important to read in your schools and celebrate books that are, diverse voices. I think that you want to foster that atmosphere that, we're going to read widely, that this is not a place for hate. This is not a place for censorship. I think that that's important, just to at least protect your school, and then to make sure that you are, showing up for school board meetings, making sure that you're, showing up for the library, your public libraries. A lot of these bans have now turned to the public library. I know that my YA novel, Private Label, was recently forced to move to the adult section in a library in Indiana. It's one of my favorite libraries. And unfortunately, their library board was pretty much, I think they just completely changed. They had people voted in who were very rigid and just did not want access to anything that had to do with any kind of sexuality, any kind of anything that has to do with growing up, really. I mean, this is a book about a 7-year-old whose mother is a fashion designer and gets cancer, and she has to quickly take over the business. So it's not really a controversial read, but it was still forced to be moved. And that's sad, because especially if you think about what our kids have to go through, and they've had so much that they had to go through with the pandemic and everything. If anything, they need more safe spaces now.
Exactly. That is so true. One of the great things is, though, and I know you know this, is kids find their way to banned books, don't they?
Yes, they do. They do find their way to banned books, but it's still it still hurts, and it's still definitely worrying that, you know, we have basically less access. Maybe the kids will find it, but maybe, you know, it could have been a whole class reading it, but now it's just one or two kids who find it, you know. It definitely impacts, I think it impacts all of us.
I think so too. Somebody wants to know who Bev Hartman is. Bev Hartman is the co-founder with me of the nonprofit, The Parent Venture. Joined me 5 years ago. She's a longtime educator, and you're seeing her answering to chat tonight. All right, Kelly, we have just a minute together, and I want to end with a question that for you just seems so appropriate because you seem like such a person of heart. After everything you've experienced in the past few years, what gives you hope?
Kids.
Kids.
Give me so much hope every day. Well, first of all, kids don't really have, they're just so pure. Kids don't really have all these, you know, hard emotions that we adults have. You know, kids are curious, they are hopeful, they are kind, they want to understand the world, they want to understand each other. You know, kids give me a lot of hope. It's the adults who come in and they, you know, judge everyone. That's part of the problem. So I think that when we keep this in mind, that we're writing for kids, we're writing for the next generation so that they don't feel so alone, so that they are equipped with the tools to succeed, that they can have the critical thinking skills to make their own decisions, so that they're not going to be, you know, they're not going to be manipulated by, you know, different interests on social media or whatnot. That's what gives me hope. I think that is so important. We just got to keep the kids in mind. And I am really, really happy that we got the opportunity to chat. You guys give me a lot of hope. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Kelly Yang, so much for tonight. And that is the perfect way to end this conversation. Parents, check out Kelly's books, the Front Desk series, and Finally Seen. I love this one. And we're all going to go get your new book too. So thank you so much, Kelly, for everything tonight. Everybody has been so happy to be here. You have a lot of fans online tonight and all over the world. So take care. Thank you, Kelly. We hope to see everybody again soon, and go read a book. Good night.
Thank you. Bye. Good night. Thank you so much. Thank you, Charlene. Bye, everyone.
Bye.